Hello, Central Oregon. This is Fred Johnson, and thank you for tuning in today to talk real estate. Like each and every one of you to take a moment here today and maybe stick your head out the window, take a look up in the sky. There's actually blue sky out there, along with that wind that came that pushed a little bit of the smoke that, for the last few weeks it's been like living in a house with low ceilings around here. You can't see out, you can't see anywhere. And if you find it within yourself today to take a moment and maybe say a little prayer or pass your thoughts on to those firefighters that are out there risking their lives, making it all possible for us to live here in Central Oregon and try to minimize the loss. It's been a horrific fire season this year, and it's one of those years that it seems that it's touched each and every one of our lives. Again, thank you for tuning into the show today. Today we're going to have a couple of different topics that we're going to talk about. I've received some emails over the week that asked some questions that I can offer a little clarification. And for those of you that are new to the show, it's Talk Real Estate. It is a talk show. You're more than welcome to call in on that line at 541-388-1110. And we love your interaction. It's really great to have this show and be able to follow Northwest Quadrant Financial and Wealth Building with Troy and Tyler. They're really doing a wonderful job down there, and I see that there's really some similarities in the message that's being put out, and I think that it's just important to be able to address that. Like Troy and Tyler, I'm an active broker here in the area, and what we're trying to do is present some information, get it out there in a relatively unbiased manner so that people can make the decisions that work best for them. And, the bottom line to all of that is to surround yourself with good people. Mom and dad told you that, when we were kids, and it's really no different as we grow up and get a little older and start dealing with some of the largest money issues in our life, our real estate, our retirement, our investment strategies. And, you can't fake experience. And if you find those with years of experience that listen to your needs and respect your goals, to surround yourself with seasoned professionals is really, really a good way to enter the market. I think all too often, and that's something we'll get into here a little bit today, there's some oversimplification that happens out there that makes us sort of feel like we can use discount services or try to do some things ourselves. And it's not to say that on occasion you do have that success story and somebody does hit a home run. But, in big deals, when it's an all or nothing and we're talking about risk, maybe to minimize the risk a little bit and surround yourself with people that can help you attain your goals without getting to that all or nothing, that all or nothing sort of scenario. So anyway, hats off to those guys, and hope that you enjoy the show. And you're always more than welcome to call in and share your expressions, ask some questions, do whatever you'd like to do. So one of the things that I'm going to get to after my recap here today is, you can always contact me either at my website direct, which is askfredjohnson.com. There's a little place there where you can put in your questions or suggestions or any of that sort of thing. You can always email me direct at fred@dukewarner.com. And one of the things that I'm trying to do with the Tech Boys is we're trying to get to where maybe we could be a little bit more interactive with Twitter or something like that, to where I guess actually in real time, if you didn't want to call in, you could tweet. This is all new to me. Tweet a question, or even after the show, we would be able to continue the conversation on that mode. So when that time comes available, I will certainly share that with you and share the contact information with you. But in the interim, askfredjohnson.com is a good way to get through to me, or my email address, which is fred@dukewarner. A couple of weeks ago, just to hit on that, I had attended a local seminar that our area was actually blitzed. I don't think there's anybody that missed it, where a gentleman, I think his name was Thane Merrill, from Flip Your Home fame, came to town, or representatives of his organization came to town to make presentations on how to flip your home, how you too can be a millionaire with little or no effort. And again, this is one of those things that sort of preys on the misinformation that's out there and sort of the overstated ease in which somebody can be successful in real estate. And apparently what I had done during that show is I had just gone over a couple of the different theories that were presented in that show, and I said that they were minimized. So today what I'm going to do is go into those with a little bit more more depth and a little bit more explanation, just to sort of clarify what that is. And those items were, the tax-deferred exchanges, self-directed IRAs, tax liens, and actually finding properties that are below market value. Just kind of wanted to open up on those a little bit. But this week in the news, for those of you that have been tuning in, it's been another one of those interesting weeks with news. And I certainly don't want to come across as the consummate pessimist, but I think that when in each and every one of these issues that come out, and obviously it's great for selling newspapers and that, but I think that it's our responsibility maybe sometimes to kind of take a step back and really look at the details and try to bring those details into context instead of just reading the headline and taking that as the fact and moving forward. And another one of that is, Deschutes County was up again and in the top 10 in the country. And then in the headline it said, up 11% for the year and 48% over 5 years. And that's certainly an eye-grabbing title to an article. But then when you get into it and you sort of read it, it's, as I bring up numerous times in this show, I think the thing that is really the bottom line in all of this statistical data that we receive here in Bend is that, Bend is truly only a town of 80,000 people. So that economies of scale, the percentage relationship of activity, because the overall numbers are so dramatically skewed, because we have very few properties or population, a limited population to spread it over. Before that, I gave an example yesterday when someone was talking about costs of an association fee in a very small planned unit development. They said, well, why are the fees so high? And I said, well, because there's only 8 properties that are in the development. So if there's a holding cost and they have to divide that cost by only 8 people, the bills are going to be higher. Across the street where they have 250 units, you can spread it out a little bit further. So sort of the same thing happens in this economies of scale with these numbers. And I'm not going to really go into it a lot, but basically what it said is that we were second only to San Francisco. So I think when you're doing a comparative analysis of growth and appreciation, San Francisco and Bend, Oregon aren't necessarily in the same scale or should be really represented on the same page. And the vast majority of this information came from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which also included all of the refinancing that was happening in the area. So where it gives the illusion that there's this growth and this appreciation that's shooting off the map and all of that sort of thing, the reality is there were people that were restructuring their debt, reappraising their properties, yes, probably appraising them at a larger value to maybe pay off some debt or to do something or to capitalize on the lower interest rates. But it was factored into the percentage relationships of how that grew. And basically what it said is that Oregon had a 1 year appreciation of 7.96%, and the U.S. average was about 5.39. And Bend and Redmond were defined solely as Deschutes County, and so that appreciation was at 10.87, but making it the ninth fastest in the nation. So, but I think and then nationally, things rose at 1.2. But I think that the thing that's most important there is where you have an economy like the Bend economy, that there's a number of people moving in, it's stable, there's additional employment, you're going to see more of that refinance model. When people are leaving a town, you're not going to be seeing quite as much of that. So, what we'll do is we're about ready to make a break, and when we come back from the break, we'll get into some of these issues of explanations and that. Feel free to contact us here at the station anytime at 541-388-1110, and we'll talk to you after the break. Hello out there, Central Oregon, and welcome back. Here we talk real estate. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm your host, and thank you much for tuning in today. I'm just sitting here in my office looking out, checking out this blue sky and these big white clouds, and just really being thankful for the wind that's came in today. So hopefully you're going to get out there somehow or another and enjoy it. I know that a lot of us have been pinned down because of the air quality warning. So today is the day to get out there and take that walk and hold hands and enjoy what Bend, Oregon has to offer. So before the break, we talked about, once again, Bend, Oregon makes the, the top 10 list in the country. And, my caution to that is just, what's the old saying? Take it with a grain of salt. Yes, that's true, but, we're really a lot smaller than San Francisco. Another interesting item that came up today. I don't know if I should go for the news or if I should just go on to talking about some of the issues, but I'll just sort of play along here for a minute. The other thing is that this last Wednesday, City Council decided, how they were going to disperse this $900,000 that was going toward affordable housing. And I mentioned that last week. I'm not going to labor the issue a lot, but it seems that it could use a little bit more work and attention that it's getting. So they had their meeting, and basically 1/5 of the structure estimates, 1/5 of 1% of the structure estimates in the SDCs is where this funding comes from. And so they allocated about $900,000 of it was going to go to affordable housing in town for those developers that were compliant and hit some of their affordability pressure points, which were outlined, prior to going in. But most of these loans are often no interest, and they've never been higher than 3%. There has been some commercial loans which usually run a little bit higher, but there were a number of applicants. Housing Works made an application. Habitat for Humanity made an application to purchase a couple lots. They got half of what they put in. A developer named Razanka here basically wants to build 7 affordable units, but wants to build 5 market rate units. But as it was lined out last week, and we shared, he wants to build the for-profit items first and get the loan, and then hopefully he's going to build the 7 units afterwards. And the loan was $358,000, a considerable number. Pacific Crest, an affordable housing developer, also applied, and they're going to receive $558,000 to build 48 units, but they've yet to determine where that location is going to be or what that's going to look like. Seems like the funding is a little bit ahead of the project on that one to me. But then in October, the city's going to come back around and they're going to talk about excusing some of the systems development charges, which once again is sort of an interesting process, and I won't go into that. The other discussion that they had in the housing rules was, you may have seen and tried to decipher it a little bit, and that was the accessory dwelling unit and whether they were allowed to build accessory dwelling units that were larger than 1 bedroom and larger than 600 square feet. And basically, after a fair amount of discussion, it sort of came down to there would be a need to, rewrite some planning paperwork and that sort of thing for that to go through. So they just opted to stay with the 600 square feet that's currently in the existing code. But I think that some of this core area density, some of these apartments are going to provide some more housing, and they're going to provide some more housing, particularly in areas where the demand is quite high. Another thing that was sort of a subtle little mention was that the developer fees, once again, are going to jump up on the sewer side of it by 45%. They'll do half of that in September 1st, and then the remaining portion will come in March. And I think the thing that's clear on that, I think we all agree that the best tax to be paid is that tax that's paid by somebody else. But the reality with systems development charges is the statement should really be made that the cost of housing is actually going up by this amount plus interest. Right now we've got $24,000 so that you can buy a piece of land to develop, and then by the time that's been out for a few months with the developer, the developer's got to add interest to it because that's the cost of using the money or cost of borrowing the money. So, what we're saying with that is that, yes, it does all of these great things in our community, half of which seems to be going to Parks and Rec. But basically what we're telling people is that we're going to increase the price point of entry-level housing by $30,000, which that's really not a large number when you're building $500,000, $1 million homes. That's a huge number when you're dealing in $200,000 homes. So I just think that it's one of those things that maybe to kind of keep an eye on it might be sort of interesting. Another one too that came out this week, which is pretty cool, is Facebook expansion is going to go on in Prineville. And for those of you that may not be aware, here in Central Oregon, we're blessed with a couple of things, and that's well, three things, I guess it would be. Inexpensive land being number one. Number two is plenty of power. We have power going through here with the trunk lines that are coming from Bonneville Power Plant. And third is we have an almost unlimited amount of fiber optic lines. So the reason that we're seeing some of this tech and we're seeing these data centers coming into the area is because we have power, inexpensive land, and a lot of fiber optic service. So the Crook County entered into a deal where basically Facebook would receive a tax exemption for the property for the next 15 years for their new third data center. That tax break allows Facebook, but it forces them to spend about $200 million, and it will create about 10 jobs. So, the data centers don't really do an awful lot to create employment in the area, but they do a lot as far as some of the donations and the contributions they do back to the school and the youth programs and some of that sort of thing. So they're certainly a good neighbor, and I'm certainly not trying to make light of that at all. So, and then there was another article about the fears of parking that are associated with college, and then maybe Corvallis could weigh in on what was in Ben's future on the west side. So here in a little bit, I think I'm just going to go ahead and get started with this tax deferred exchange. One of the things with these flip your home, you can be a millionaire, you can do this sort of thing. They present a lot of issues. And they sort of speak in large, cryptic terms, and little things like we bought a house for $100,000 and we sold it for $200,000 and made $100,000. But the thing that's sort of omitted in the dialogue is that they either had to have the skill set to be able to paint and do the improvements and the carpet and all of that in between, or they had to contract all of that out. And the expense of getting from the 100 to the 200 is sort of left out of the discussion. So what the recipient wants to hear is, wow, you mean I can go out and buy something for 100 and sell it for 200 and make a quick $100,000? When, unless you're really, really skilled, that's probably not too likely, and as in all businesses, it's called a cost of goods sold, and whatever your initial acquisition is, plus the labor, plus the additional expenses that you need to put into that to bring it to market, you have to subtract that from your gross sales, and then that gives you your adjusted income, what it is. And I think that, so because a lot of us, of course, would love to find a way that it's quick and easy to make a lot of money, these guys ran ads on the television, on the radio, blitzed every channel, set up 4 different meetings just here in Bend, Oregon, and had a number of people attend and then sign up for an additional 3-day seminar after that to have the opportunity to learn how to make millions of dollars quick and easy. And I'm not trying to do anything to undermine that. I'm just trying to bring some of the factual information to how some of these things work that were discussed in the meeting and sort of shed a little light on them, so at least those people that are considering going into that line of work will understand that there's a little bit more to it than you see on the surface. A lot of these style of things, I've been to a number of seminars through the years, and obviously you need to take action. It's a great theory. It sounds really good, but if you don't get up off the couch and get out there and make it happen, the likelihood of it happening isn't too good. So when we come back, what we'll do is I'll talk about a couple of the points that they had talked about, which was how to redirect your IRA, how to deal with a tax deferred exchange, tax liens, which is a little humorous because the state of Oregon doesn't allow that process, but I'll share with you the states that do. And I hope that you'll continue on and stay on after the break. Hello there, Bend, Oregon. Welcome back. Here we are on Talk Real Estate. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm your host. And before the break, I kind of did a little lead in on what we're going to talk about for this next little quadrant here, which is the format of flip that home, flip your home. And obviously there's television shows. There's a number of people that are out there trying to make it look pretty oversimplified. But maybe if I may, I'm going to share a couple of items with you that may be helpful. Maybe helpful as you gauge to find out, if this is a career path for you, and sort of how to keep things in line and sort of separate some of the fact from the fiction just a little bit. And the basic premise of the whole thing is that you would be able to acquire a property at well below its current market value, and the reason that you would want to do that is that would allow you then to build some equity in it, whether it's through improving or adding on or marketing or whatever it may be. But the bottom line, and quite simply, I've got a couple things here just to share with you that as I said earlier, a lot of it depends on sort of the health of the city, if you will, or the health of the location of the property. If you have an area where they've shut down the major employer, everybody's starting to leave town and find different places to go, properties will then often fall below replacement costs. And basically replacement cost is the price per square foot of the property completely improved, with the land, with the systems development charges, with the landscaping, with all of that included. But you can sort of break it down to a value by per square foot. So, and the easy way, instead of breaking out all of the individual pieces and all of that sort of thing, is to go find comparable new construction. Now, granted, new construction has a little bit of profit in there, but that's establishing market value, and you too are going to want profit. So if you look at a project or you look at a property and you realize, gosh, everything around here is selling for $150 a square foot, and I can get in, and by the time I'm done painting this property, I can be into it for $100 a square foot. Obviously, you're in there below replacement costs. It makes it worth your while to be able to do that. And I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but to find that particularly in the lower sector of the market in Bend is relatively difficult. It's not just as easy as getting in the truck and, going out and finding 2 or 3 of them and making an offer at them. And secondly, my personal experience has been those people that seem to do this, work the tax foreclosures or that sort of thing, and do a relatively decent job, are kind of bare minimum a 2-person team, and one person handles the clerical aspect of it. Oftentimes the wife will be at home with the computer, maintaining the files, maintaining all of the items about the properties that are potentially coming up. And then on the other side of the equation is the tradesperson, if you will, somebody that's probably got a pickup truck, the tools, the skills, the ability to be able to not only inspect the properties, but to be able to add the value to those properties once they're discovered, and then know which ones we're going to make a run at or which ones we're not going to make a run at. So to think that we could sit on our sofa with a bag of Doritos and lightly go online with our remote control, watching ball games on the other side, and acquire one of these properties, it quite frankly just doesn't happen out there. So when we're looking at the properties and how to go forward, a couple of the items that are mentioned that sound kind of like easy money and easy processes. And one of them is really quite an amazing deal, and it's called the buying tax liens. Now, Oregon is not one of the states that you can buy tax liens. You can do it Alabama, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Indiana, Iowa. There are actually 23 states in the country where you can buy a tax lien. And basically the way that works is that someone falls in arrears on their taxes. Now, in the state of Oregon, what happens is the county, gets in contact with them, lets them know that they're in arrears on their taxes. If they don't pay them and with penalties, then what happens is the county then starts the foreclosure process and starts to move forward. What these other states have elected to do is they wanted to get out of the tax foreclosure business. So what they allow somebody else to basically pay your taxes and lien your property. That thereby gives them, a toehold on your property, if you will. Let's say I'll make it a really simple case. So you own your property free and clear, and you haven't paid your taxes, and for whatever reason, and then Joe up the street buys your tax lien. Well, then Joe can then tax lien or can foreclose, on his position on your property, and potentially buy your property for the amount of the back taxes that he paid. And now, obviously, as you can see with just that scenario, if that were the case, and if you could go out and do that, there's an opportunity to make a heck of a lot of money if you could buy tax liens. Well, the state of Oregon, unfortunately, is not one of those states. So to talk to an audience in Oregon about buying tax liens, just really isn't fair, because it can't happen here. Another one of them that's mentioned a fair amount is, self-directed IRAs, being able to transfer the money from your retirement account Generally, you would hire a custodian to do that. You'd roll over, what you probably have is stocks and mutual funds and all that sort of stuff, and roll it into this custodian that you would then be able to redirect into different properties. Now, on the surface, boy, does that sound easy. It sounds like something that you would really want to do. But there's some very specific guidelines on the backside where, the IRS does not allow that and will not only penalize but also charge taxes in the event something in the process is violated and is handled correctly. And there's a little bit of a difference between Roth IRAs, which is where you pay your taxes up front so that no matter how big it gets on the backside, you get your money tax free, or traditional, which is you don't pay taxes on it going in, but when it comes out on the backside, you pay taxes on it at that time. An old rancher told me one time you can either pay tax on the seed or you can pay tax on the crop, and he'd prefer to pay tax on the seed so that he could pay it up front. But the potential advantages are that you could, buy a duplex, turn it over to property management. The rental income that was coming in off of that property would go directly into your retirement account through the management. And you could also do your annual contribution to the account as well, and thereby be able to accelerate the growth of that account. But sort of the thing that's overlooked is, unless you have enough money in your self-directed IRA to be able to pay cash for these properties and allow for a reserve account, getting financing, which is called non-recourse financing, is virtually not available. It's very, very, very difficult. I'm going to throw 3 varies in there just to sort of overstate how difficult that is. And you as the contributor to that account, you cannot derive, you can't touch the money, you can't be involved in the property management, you can't use the property. There's a number of things that were there. So, as I said earlier about surrounding yourself with professionals to be able to help you, nothing would be worse than to get lured into one of these programs, maybe lured's overstating it, but to find appeal in one of these programs and get into it, and then basically compromise the integrity of your life savings in your retirement account, thinking that you were going to slam one over the fence. Not to say that it's not possible, not to say that it's certainly not available. It really is. But again, this is a time where you need seasoned professionals. You need to be able to lay it out. You need to know exactly what the risk and reward is and whether it fits into your financial plan, because it's not just a quick and easy. And, historically, a number of the other models for, your traditional IRAs and, keeping them with their broker, and then you can make selections there, whether you're going to be in an aggressive fund or not. Now, here I am. I'm talking about stuff that the boys at Northwest Quadrant should be the ones that are talking to you about. But just be mindful of the fact that the self-directed IRA, isn't the end-all, cure-all. Maybe when we get back, what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about tax-deferred exchanges. Tax-deferred exchanges is another one of those topics that seems to get, a little bit of headline status, and it really sounds pretty good on the surface. But there too, there's some compliance issues that go along with it that people need to be mindful of as they enter into that, and for specific people and specific needs, those work really well. Again, I wanted to remind you that you're here on Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. You can contact me anytime at my website, which is just simply askfredjohnson.com. Just run them all together. You don't need to put any spaces between ask or Fred Johnson and .com. And there's a space there where you can write in. You can offer some suggestions as to topics or someone you'd like to hear interviewed, or just give me an earful if you're so inclined. I'd always love to appreciate hearing that. Or you can always email me direct at fred@dukewarner.com. So after we come back from the break, we'll get into tax-deferred exchanges, and I'll look forward to talking to you then. Yeehaw, Central Oregon. Welcome back. This is Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm your host. And so right before the break, we were discussing a number of things, and I had I had a call during the break, and I just wanted to share that the gentleman that was listening said that is is that price per square foot analysis that I used a good one just when purchasing properties as a user? And what I would say to that is yes, most definitely. If when you're looking at property valuation and what's going on with property valuation, to be mindful of what replacement cost is in the neighborhood certainly will let you know if you're in an area that's appreciating rapidly or not, and will allow you to be a much more efficient, much more effective buyer. Let me take a look here. See, I think we might have.
Hello.
Hello there. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Hello, Fred. It's Linda.
Hey, Linda. How are you today?
I'm pretty darn good. I like this wind and I like this weather, and it's cool, and I'm doing just fine, thanks.
Oh, wonderful. You know, isn't it great to be able to see blue sky again?
It is. It really is. I love Central Oregon clouds more than anything. They're just so wonderful.
Well, I'm glad you're. Yes, ma'am.
I just kind of popped in from being outside, and I heard what you were discussing, and this is not quite along the same lines, but sufficiently enough that I figured you might have an answer. Years ago, a property my late husband and I didn't purchase because there were 8 acres, and he wanted to do something, and it had to be 10 acres.
Uh-huh.
And the property ran parallel to the highway on Highway 20 for some distance. And a young lady who was quite astute bought it, and she told us that there is a law in Oregon whereby the existing property can add highway, actual highway, to the center line to be considered part of the whole property unit. And in doing that, she acquired 10 acres. Is that fact? Have you ever heard of that before?
You know, I have not heard of that before. However, it's not at all, generally speaking, when we're dealing with highways acquire the right-of-way. So they already own that land underneath, and quite honestly, they don't vacate it. On the other hand, there are properties that have granted an easement across their property, and if in fact the true property line ran to the middle of the road and it was a result of an easement, I would be highly suspect of it, to be perfectly honest. Then there's a possibility that the original parcel was in fact a 10-acre parcel, though there was only 8 acres usable in your instance. But you know, generally speaking, you know, Oregon Department of Transportation is the governing body for our highways in the state. And their primary focus is commerce. They want to make certain that the trucking lanes remain open to move products from area to area and keep commerce alive. And oftentimes on highway frontage like that, they really like to limit the number of accesses and driveways coming into the highway, you know, so to make them much safer. So that's where we'll see those. You see them every now and again in either the form of a frontage street where you'll come in and then you'll go into a frontage street that'll access a number of different users, or sometimes you'll go to a business and you'll see a right in, right out, which means that you don't have to cross a lane of traffic to either get to the property or to leave the property. So as far as going to the Oregon Department of Transportation and saying, you know, hey, I'd like to, I'll let you use it, but I'd like to acquire the rights to 2 acres of land under your highway. Boy, I don't know. I've never heard of that one, and I've been around for over 30 years.
Well, I don't think that it's actually an acquisition. I think that it is merely a, quote, acknowledged addition, which, I mean, certainly you can't dig up the highway or do anything like that, but in that process, and this was 20 years ago, in that process, this young lady was able to add 2 acres or whatever was necessary to get a full 10 acres. And it was an 8 or 9 acre parcel. And I remember my husband just being so flummoxed by that, saying, golly, if I had known that rule, I would have bought that place. Well,
there's something to be said for that. It would seem more likely to me that she probably pursued a variance whereby she could have said that the initial parcel, the mother parcel as we call it sometimes, was 10 acres in dimension, but in the right-of-way acquisition, the highway came and took this portion, but I should still be able to develop it like it's a 10-acre parcel. That scenario would seem more likely to me than to try to get ODOT to vacate a piece of property.
Oh, no, you'd never try to, that's like...
They don't give up
mountains. No.
That's exactly right.
It would be foolish to try, but so you think there actually is a feasibility that just by claiming it, and probably you're right, probably the 10-acre original piece was the turning point.
Well, and if it was and we see that an awful lot. We see that an awful lot here in rural properties in Bend, where you'll have, let's say, rural residential 10 or multi-use agricultural 10, and then you find the vacant piece of property and it's only 4 acres in dimension. Well, even though the zoning designation says that it's a rural residential 10, basically what that means is that you cannot reduce the size of a larger parcel to anything smaller than 10 acres. But that doesn't necessarily limit a piece of property that may fall underneath that zone that was legally partitioned at a previous time to a smaller size. So you could have, I lived on one recently, that you can have a piece of property that was, let's say, 4 acres in dimension and still be zoned as RR10 or MUA10, and still be able to build a house on it because it's a legal parcel. It's a legal lot of record is the term that's used.
I see, but it's not actually 10 physical acres.
No, but they cannot deny the ability to develop that property if that dimension was arrived at legally and is actually recognized. Kind of needs to be recognized both ways, but the most important one is it needs to be recognized by the county assessor as a legal lot of record so that they can tax it. But
so you're taxed at 10, but building on 4.
Right. But if you had, let's say you had 36 acres and you had MUA 10, well, you couldn't divide that any smaller than 3 because you could create 3 10s, but the 6 that's left over doesn't get to 10, so it doesn't allow you to split it 4 times. Okay? So that's kind of where that, in the zoning designation, that's where the acreage minimum comes into play. But in existing lots, and this may have been a case where it was an existing lot that may have had a 10-acre minimum overlay, and the perception was, well, because it's not 10 acres and it's in a 10-acre overlay, we couldn't do anything. Go ahead, let me go already.
Thank you, Fred, very much.
Well, Linda, I can actually tune this down a little bit. Thank you so much for calling. I really appreciate your support of the show and coming in, and keep those calls coming.
Well, keep those mistakes happening.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, and thanks for calling in today. And to all the rest of you, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm sorry that I didn't have the opportunity to get to our tax-deferred exchanges, but maybe we'll allow that happen next time. So until then, have a good week. Get out and love Central Oregon.